Today we're going to reflect on SD 47.7, the Chora Raja Sutta, the discourse on thieves and kings. This is from Anguttara, the Book of Two, Sutta number 39, or A.39. And the theme here is on good minds and bad minds affect one another and also affects the world. Now, many of us think that studying suttas or even listening to suttas is very difficult. The main reason for this strong idea is because we think that when we study suttas or listen to suttas, it's only about knowing things. We have to know something to collect knowledge. Although there are some aspects of sutta learning that we need to know, which can be very joyful indeed, the real purpose of studying suttas, whether we do it ourselves or listening to a teaching like this, is for personal cultivation. Personal cultivation is a very important term in Buddhist practice, in religious practice in general, in fact. Personal cultivation, the two important words. Number one is personal. You have to do it yourself, because we're talking about our own personal happiness. If we are not happy, it's very difficult to make other people happy. We cannot, if we do not make an effort to save ourselves, so to speak, nobody can. So this personal effort is very important in early Buddhism. Number two, cultivation. That means change, growth, becoming better, progressing, advancing nearer and nearer towards awakening, towards seeing and realizing our true self, our true nature, to nirvana, total liberation. So, why do we study suttas? Not so much to know things, although that's a part of it. We listen to suttas to reflect, so that something good happens to us, so that we change. So, studying suttas, listening to sutta teaching like this, should be regarded as what is called a spiritual exercise. I like the word spiritual exercise because it means you make an effort. And this effort deals with your spirit. Here, spirit is a general term. It can refer to the mind, it refers to something beyond the mind, and definitely beyond the body. Now in Singapore, we do physical exercise is very important, but often not mentioned is spiritual exercise or even mental exercise. Mental exercise is just like knowing things, learning things, even strengthening the mind, so to speak. Yeah? But spiritual exercise is something much, much more. It's about understanding the nature of our minds, how it works, and in that way, strengthening it, making it happy, freeing it. Only in freeing the mind will you really be happy. But what do you free the mind from? You free the mind from the bonds of the five senses. The five senses hold back the mind, so to speak, by making the mind process various data from seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, what to process. This sense data like answering 5 phones all the time, like a stock exchange. So you imagine how difficult it is. But there's a sixth sense. That's the mind, which does the processing. And the mind also creates its own data. So you can imagine we have to deal with 6 situations. Not easy. That's why we need spiritual cultivation, learning to let go of the 6 doors, if you like, closing them, so to speak. It's opening one door, the mind door. in spiritual exercise. That is to clear, to upgrade these five sense data collectors, these five senses, if you like. Then when we return to this world, so to speak, the senses function more clearly, we are more in charge of them, and they do our bidding, and we are truly happy. We have self-control. Now this sutta is, in a sense, is about control. These are two very familiar words. Anyone who knows some Indian words will know these two words. They are very common words. Chora means a thief or a bandit. It's quite a general term in modern times. Then Raja means king. From the word Raja, which is a tatsama, meaning Sanskrit and Pali is the same word, we get the Latin word rex. And then you have the feminine, is Rajini. And from Rajini you get the Latin and the English word Regina. So you can see even English is very close. It has connections through Latin and Greek to the Indo-Aryan languages, of which Sanskrit is the most famous. So Chora Raja Sutta is a sutta about thieves and kings, or bandits and kings. And the sutta is very simple, very direct, but it is very meaningful, especially for our times. Let's look at the sutta and then I'll comment on it. Page 79. The Discourse on Thieves and Kings, in 2.39. Bhikshus, at a time when thieves or bandits are powerful, the king is then weak. At that time, bhikshus, the king is not at ease when returning to the city or departing, or when out inspecting or supervising the country. At that time, bhikshus, Brahmins and housemasters too are not at ease when returning to the city or departing, or when out attending to their work outside. Just a little correction here. Please revise the translation slightly. Or when attending to their work outside. Even so, bhikshus. Alright, so here we have a familiar situation. So here again we have what I call the counterpoint method. The counterpoint method of teaching. It's a term from music. You get the word contrapuntal. Counterpoint means you have two melodies playing and they kind of talk to each other or sing to each other. So here we have two stories, two teachings being given. One is about the war, okay? Something the audience know very well, something we know very well too. Of course, in our times we might say, if kidnappers and criminals are strong, the government will be weak. And there are lots of disadvantages in that case, right? So the Buddha is using this very familiar theme. This is a socio-political theme, and then he's going to compare this to the situation in the Sangha, in the monastic community, in Buddhism as a whole. So this is the change is represented by the word even so. Even so, bhikshus, at a time when bad monks are powerful, well-behaved monks are then weak. Now, when we say the good monks are weak, we're not saying that the good monks are bad. They're socially weak. That's the meaning here. In contrast to the strength and influence of the bad monks. Another way of putting it is, when the bad monks are strong, influential, widespread, famous and so on, people don't really bother or have a chance to meet the good monks. Why is that? And the Buddha continues, section 5, he says, at that time, bhikshus, the well-behaved monks only sit in silence in the midst of the Sangha, or they resort to the outlying country. Alright, so what does this mean? Here, in other words, when there is a gathering of monks, there's so many bad monks, they're so noisy, so the good monks, they do not want to fight and shout, so they remain quiet. They remain quiet not because they are afraid. Well, maybe some good monks might be afraid, for the simple fact that they're humble, maybe new monks. But they remain silent because they do not want to quarrel, they do not want to fight. It's not proper for monks to get into any kind of altercation in public, especially, or even in what was called in conclave. So they do not speak. Or even if they do speak, the other monks will not listen to them. Well, in a sense, this did happen in Buddhist history. There was a time when there was this big group of monks, and there was this smaller group of elders who are serious about the practice, and they probably got outvoted or they were outnumbered. So there was this big group who called themselves the Great Sangha, Mahasangika. Sadly, this Mahasangika is forgotten now, but the smaller group we know today as the Theravada. So we do have a bit of history here. The Buddha continues. So what happens here when this kind of situation arises? Section 6. This bhikshus is not for the good of the many, nor for the happiness of the many, not for the benefit of the people, not for the good, but for the suffering of devas and humans. So in other words, when the monks behave badly, or the majority of them are bad, society gets affected too. Even the heavens are affected. How interesting here. So in other words, here in Buddhism we believe that things on earth affect heaven rather than things in heaven affect earth. In a sense, the gods are watching us, so to speak, right? Once the Buddha said, the foolish man does evil, he thinks no one knows about it. Then he says, oh foolish man, you yourself know you've done something bad. But not only you know that, the Buddhas and the Devas also know what you're doing. It's a very interesting remark. How do the Buddhas and the Devas know what a bad person is doing? Okay, and in the case of the Buddha, let's say this person, although he has done bad deeds, he also has done some good deeds which make him reborn in the Buddha's time, is able to meet the Buddha. And then, let's say he becomes a monk one day, and he's not able to meditate. And perhaps the Buddha will say, oh, you have done something bad in the past, and here you are. It's time to outgrow that bad thing you have done. Actually, the Buddha knows in that sense. Of course, here, if we care to go deep into the sutta, it's good that the Buddha knows, but it's going to help us. So in a sense, although the Buddha is giving what sounds like a nasty warning, actually, if you're wise, you say, wow, actually it's a good thing, but the Buddha knows he's able to help you, right? But unfortunately, the bad doer does not think that way, so the bad doer will be terrified to hear that, oh, the Buddha knows. Just like a robber, say, oh, someone knows, they're afraid to be caught or punished. What about the devas? Well, let's imagine these devas, there are some kind of aliens far away with telescopes, or some kind of a machine or monitors which can see us on Earth, and they kind of know what's going on. So there's another way we can see it. Or more realistically, because of the teaching of rebirth, we can say that devas are also our relatives. So of course they become an eye on us and know us. So the next time we are reborn or that they are reborn, they sort of know when we've done this, right? We have stories, for example, the first two lay disciples with the Buddha, Tapusa and Panika. They were merchants, they were traveling in Orissa, and then they came to where the Buddha was sitting meditating. He's not met any human yet, it seems. So the devas They were relatives of these two merchants. Say, hey, why don't you go to see the Buddha? It's just down the road, you know. Of course, the devas are not very wise. Just go and see the Buddha for blessing, because they're businessmen. So they just went to the Buddha, and they took 2 refuges. There was no Sangha yet, and they asked for blessings. So they were asking for teachings. So although they were the first 2 disciples, they did not get any teachings. Anyway, the fact that they did meet the Buddha is of course something wonderful. I'm sure later on they will come back to see the Buddha. Anyway, so here, coming back to the sutta, the Buddha says that when the monks behave in a bad way, they affect others. Because they're public figures, people take them as benchmarks for goodness. So if a monk behaves in that way, if a monk behaves badly, a layperson will say, why should I behave well? Right? Well, I can behave better than the monk in my own way. Right? So you have a bit of a problem there. Okay, that's the negative part. Okay, so now we have the mirror with the inverse image. Okay, now when we say mirror, an image facing each other, the other image is the opposite actually. Right? We must not forget it's not a replica, it's an inverse image, opposite image. So here we have something positive. This is the wholesome half of the teaching, and this is the one we should pay careful attention to. In other words, this is the solution. Previous is the problem. Here again we see a bit of the pattern of the Noble Truth in action. Right? You see the problem and the cause, right, in the first part, and then you see the solution and the method and the solution in the second part. Right? So it's another interesting pattern. You can apply lots of teachings here in that way. Section 7 now begins the positive half of the sutta. Bhikshus, at a time when the king is powerful, the thieves are then weak. At that time, bhikshus, the king is at ease when returning to the city or departing or when out inspecting the country. At that time, bhikshus, Brahmins and housemasters too are at ease when returning to the city or departing or when out attending their work. So this is a strong society, good government, peaceful, prosperous. Right? So here, that's the world, and then you have the spiritual community. Even so, bhikshus, at the time when well-behaved monks are strong, bad monks are then weak. Right? So if you have more good monks, the bad monks will not be so influential. At that time, bhikshus, the bad monks only sit silently in the midst of the sangha. Right? So when the monks are gathered, the bad monks can't do very much. Or here the bad monks, or they fall away on that account. In other words, they fall away for various, or they leave for various places. Okay, there are 2 senses we can interpret this last part of the sentence. They could fall from being a monk, then they give up the training, and they leave the order, all the better for the sangha. Or they could go to some quiet place and live by themselves in a remote area, not troubling society. So the good monks will be present giving teachings. This bhikshus is for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, for the benefit of the people, for the good, for the happiness of devas and humans. Right. So this is a situation where you have the good monks. They are there, they are teaching, they are telling people what to do, and their voice is louder in that sense. So how does a monk become good, remain good, and have that good influence on us? The very first thing is we must never think of modernizing the Sangha. We have this idea that the Sangha is outdated when we say we need to modernize it. There was one, I do not like to use the word monk here, I want to use the word priest because this is a bad one. Okay? So this priest was caught misusing public funds, and he has lots of property, he even owns horses and goes for diving holidays and does all kinds of worldly things which even mostly people who support the temples have no chance of doing. Of course, he has a nice condo, a large bank account, many cars including a gold card. And when he was asked in court why he does such things, he says, well, these are modern times, and monks must change too. Now that's a really shocking reply. It just shows he has totally no idea what being a monk is about. So it's very sad for people who really know the Vinaya, people who understand the Buddha's teachings. So, and even sadder thing is he's not alone, there are many others like him. So if we have more bad monks like that, we are in serious trouble. The good monks will be quiet. The good teachers will be less vocal because they cannot be heard so well. But does that mean the good monks and the good teachers should be silent? Well, they should not be silent. They should go on speaking, even in the undertones of all these bad things going on. As long as the teachers teach, or today, nowadays, we write things, these teachings will be preserved, the teachings will be recorded, and people will listen one day. And the good people will gather strength in due course. If the Sangha is not able to solve the problems of the Sangha and the monks and nuns commit wrong things, then the law of the country will have to deal with them. Then people will start wondering, what's wrong here? The good people will start questioning. The concerned people will start changing things for the better. And I'd like to see this in a positive way. In other words, in the next generation you see a new situation where the good people will get together, change things. This has to happen. If this doesn't, then Buddhism will die out. So this sutta is a very important reminder for us to speak out when we feel something is wrong. And in Buddhism there's always a spirit of speaking out gently but firmly, of teaching the Dharma in a correct way. But better than just talking is our practice. Because without the practice, without the calmness, the wisdom and the compassion in us, it's not easy to address such matters. So by our practice of studying the suttas, keeping the precepts, meditating, and showing our joy to others, we would be in a better position to show others why it's more important that we keep Buddhism just as it is, not to modernize it, because the Buddha's Dharma, the Dhamma Vinaya, is like fresh air. It's like the beautiful mountains and trees and forests. Here we are building cities, leveling the land, and creating all kinds of human structures. We love to go back to nature, to the mountains, to the hills, to the valleys, to the open spaces, fresh air. Now we're not going to modernize fresh air, are we? We do not do modernize fresh air. We want the air to be fresh. We have to think of the Sangha, we have to think of the Dharma, we have to think of the Buddha in that way. We don't need to change the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. We need to change ourselves. So this is the reflection to remind us of such very basic truths so that we are truly happy here and hereafter. Okay, now let us do a short reflection before we close. The best way to preserve the Dharma is to practice it. when we practice it, we sooner or later relieve the Buddha's peace and the wisdom of the teachings he has given to the early saints. The teachings are still there. If we don't change them, if we don't distort the sutras, the wisdom is there in clear and soothing words. Reflecting in this way is wonderful good karma. With the power of such karma, may we be empowered to aspire to attain at least true winning in this life itself. And by the same token, by virtue of the three jewels, may let us send out our loving kindness to all those people who have been kind to us, those people who are practicing the Dharma, our families and loved ones and friends. May they be well, may they be happy. And those people who have been supporting us to be well and happy. And also those who have difficulty studying the Dharma, who are still not in touch with the true teaching. May they in this life itself see the joyful truth for themselves. May all peace, be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.